1 week after receiving the draft day call from John Schneider, Byron Murphy II was finally introduced to Seattle media at the VMAC. What were the key takeaways from his first press conference as a Seahawk? I'll be diving in coming up next here on our Thursday edition of Locked On Seahawks.
You are Locked On Seahawks, your daily Seattle Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Greetings, 12. This is Corbin Smith, host of the Locked On Seahawks podcast, your daily Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. A special thanks to all the 12s that are tuning in, whether you're listening in Payson, Arizona, or Sioux Falls. We greatly appreciate each and every one of you for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. Byron Murphy II finally introduced to Seahawk fans his introductory press conference at the VMAC alongside John Schneider as well as Mike Macdonald. I will be diving into some of the key takeaways from that press conference and taking a post-draft look at Seattle's depth chart on offense and defense, and wrapping the show up previewing the coming rookie minicamp that will kick off tomorrow at the VMAC. This episode is brought your way by Monopoly Go. I admit I have a competitive side, and it is a big fan of Monopoly Go, the mobile hit twist on classic Monopoly. So join your friends and download Monopoly Go now for free on the App Store or Google Play. Now for your lead story here on our Thursday edition of Locked On Seahawks. In the past couple of years, Seahawk fans have gotten to hear from their first-round pick, or last year in the case, first-round picks, literally the day after they were selected. But that did not happen this year with Byron Murphy II, the defensive tackle out of Texas that Seattle drafted 16th overall. He didn't fly out to Seattle for his official press conference until today. It was a busy day. Everybody was buzzing at the VMAC, getting the opportunity to hear from Byron Murphy II. And there were a lot of interesting things that were said by John Schneider, Mike Macdonald, and most notably the player himself in this introductory presser. Some goof topics, some really serious ones as well. The thing that I'm going to say jumped out to me first. When you're looking at first-round picks in general, there is an incredible amount of burden that is put on the shoulders of first-round picks. You are the first guys off the board. Fans expect that you're going to be able to come in and be an immediate contributor. That doesn't always happen, obviously, but when you are picked that early in the draft, there are incredibly lofty expectations. And Byron Murphy II is not hiding from those at all. And today, he said not only does he want to lead the Seahawks back to the Super Bowl the way that the Legion of Boom era Seahawks did, but he also wants to be the defensive rookie of the year this year. So he is not backing down from having really lofty goals that he's setting for himself. And some fans may say that that is setting himself up for failure because of the pressure, but this guy is a cool, just combined words there, a cool, calm customer. You could see that today. He is soft-spoken, and yet you can take a quiet confidence to him. And the fact that he played a lot of snaps, a true freshman at Texas with all the talent they had on that defensive line, and then 2 years later was an All-American, Defensive Player of the Year in the Big 12. This is a kid that has been able to outperform expectations leading up to this point, and now he's really excited to hopefully do that even as a first-round pick. So that was the first thing that really jumped out to me. The second thing, this was not the biggest need for the Seattle Seahawks going into the 2024 NFL Draft. Seattle had just re-signed Leonard Williams. Jarran Reed was still under contract. Draymond Jones was still under contract. They had a couple of encouraging sophomores coming in. And Mike Moore's only get to see him in one game last year, but he looked good in training camp. Cameron Young played quite a few snaps at nose tackle. This was a team that had a lot of veterans that were quality veterans at the defensive tackle position. And compared to some other spots in the defense, it wasn't an immediate need. And yet the opportunity to pick Byron Murphy II, that was good for the Seahawks to pass up, even with some of the offers that they were getting, some really strong offers to trade up, including from teams such as the Atlanta Falcons and the Pittsburgh Steelers. They were not going to pass up the chance to draft Byron Murphy II. Just too good of a player. It didn't matter if it was a position where they were pretty well set in the short term. And you have to remember that this is a team that finished 32nd in run defense the last 10 games of the year. I don't think a lot of that falls on the interior defensive linemen. There were a lot of other issues on this defense. But still, you can make the argument if the best player available is a defensive lineman, we got to go for it. And in that case, that's exactly what happened with Byron Murphy II. And he is definitely leaning on some of those veteran presences that he's going to be able to play with, and that'll take some of that burden off of his shoulders, including Leonard Williams and Jarran Reed. Take a listen.
It's a great feeling knowing I'm playing with some dogs on the side of me, and man, being able to play with these guys, at a very young age, I know they're gonna, teach me a lot, show me a lot, man, and just teach me so many ways, about the game, how to move on and off the field. So, and they have Jarran Reed takes me, Leonard Williams, both of them guys hit me up, man. They just ready for me, they ready for me to come down here, which I'm here right now, and they ready to work. They ready to work with me.
Nobody should be surprised by this. Leonard Williams had a reputation in New York for being an excellent locker room guy that works with younger players. And Jarran Reed, he's transitioned from being that player the Seahawks drafted out of Alabama, the second-round pick that was learning from the likes of Tony McDaniel and players like Brandon Meebane, learning from players like that and transitioning into that leadership role himself. And he took the young defensive tackles under his wing last year. He's absolutely going to do that with Byron Murphy II. And this is a kid that already had he was close to being a graduate when he went to Texas because of the college courses that he had already taken. We're talking about a mature young man who is going to come into this situation ready to put in the work. He's going to be prepared. And unlike a lot of first-round picks who don't have those mentors at their position group, think about it. Most of the time, teams are picking players in the first round who fill major needs because they don't have much talent at that position. The Seahawks, they've got the luxury where they have some really solid veteran players that are going to be able to mentor him, and he can be the apprentice in this situation. He doesn't have to come in and be a savior for this defensive line on day one. So that was definitely the first thing that jumped out to me today, looking at some non-Seahawk fan-related topics. Second big thing, this kid has been so much fun to learn about over the last week or so. I already knew going into the draft process that he had previously played running back. Of course, the running back coach in me knew that, but he also was a really good linebacker his first 2 years in high school. And he was talking about it today, and you could see Mike Macdonald, the huge smile on his face, a 250-pound linebacker, and he was really good at that position, but he moved up to the nose tackle spot for a play and quickly got in the backfield for a tackle for loss. And his coaching staff approached him and said, hey, would you like to play nose tackle? And initially, he was not necessarily loving the idea of doing that. He loved playing linebacker. It is a little bit more glamorous of a position, but being the big-bodied guy that he was, he accepted that move and ended up growing into one of the best defensive tackles in his recruiting class. Texas brings him in from DeSoto High School, which has kicked out a lot of really good college and NFL players over the years. And so that background, you can see in his game with the quickness, the penetrating ability, the instincts, the lateral mobility, all those things come from a prior background where, as he said today, he used to dominate in Little League football and Pee Wee football, running for 3 or 4 touchdowns a game. Can you imagine trying to tackle a 250-pound running back? He changed over from that position his freshman year in high school, and then being a 250-pound linebacker that had the range to be able to go around the field, smack people, and he turned into a really good defensive tackle. And you can see those athletic traits, including running a sub-4.9 40-yard dash at the combine. You don't see many 300-pound guys that have that kind of athleticism, and it's because of that background playing those other positions. And the last thing that really jumped out to me today, the mentality aspect. And this goes back, if you were listening to yesterday's interview, we had Pete Kwiatkowski, the defensive coordinator of Texas, on the show breaking down Byron Murphy II's game, and he was talking about how much the mental part of the game allowed Murphy to have success despite being under 300 pounds last year, playing the nose tackle position. And I just point blank asked him coming out of that interview what his opinion was playing that nose tackle spot, whether he believes that it's more about what the physical tools are or the mental tools. And he said that he believes it's 90% mental and it's 10% physical. So he says the technique, the mentality, those are the biggest keys when you are playing in the trenches, when you're dealing with double teams, going against centers and guards. And he believes he can play that spot for the Seahawks if they ask him to do so. I don't know how much he's going to be doing that in the NFL, especially with Jonathan Hankins and Cameron Young on the roster. And Jarran Reed can play nose tackle as well. They may not need him to do that, but he is more than confident that if they need to slide him down to 0 or 1 technique, that he can hold his own, and he plays with good leverage. He uses great technique. And then he's got the physicality to go with that mentality and his technical aspects. So this is a kid that is just ready to do whatever the Seahawks are going to ask him to do. I think he's going to settle in playing mostly 3 tech, maybe some big end at 5 tech snaps for the Seahawks on defense. But if they play nose, particularly in pass rushing downs, that's where he could be really dangerous at that position in the NFL, and he believes he can handle it. So a lot of exciting things coming out of this press conference, and there's a reason there's a lot of hype around this kid who the Seahawks had as their highest graded defensive player in the entire 2024 NFL draft, and he falls to them at number 16. He's going to get to work tomorrow with the rookie minicamp, which I will be previewing later in the show. But first, going to take a step back. It's post-draft depth chart time, looking on offense and defense, where things stand, what we might see leading up to the season. Are there any other moves that are going to be coming down the pipeline for the Seahawks on offense and defense? I'm going to dive into that up next here on our Thursday edition of Locked On Seahawks. This episode is brought your way by Monopoly Go. All right, game off. We got to pause here to talk more about Monopoly Go. I know what you're saying. Flag on the play. You already about that, but there is just so much good stuff going on in the game. In Monopoly Go, you can team up with your friends for timed tournaments where you work together to build up each other's boards. The more you win together, the more awesome prizes you unlock. And there's so much to get. You have unique stickers you can trade with a friend to complete albums for big prizes. They've got cool new playing pieces to travel the boards with. And they've got hilarious emojis to taunt your friends, and they're not going to penalize you like they do in the NFL when you smash their buildings or heist their vaults. Plus, Monopoly Go feels new and exciting every day with constantly changing tournaments and challenges. A ton of them include unique mini games. You can dig for treasure, have a robot machine as well. And there's always new timed events that help you win big, like massive multipliers for everything you win or rent frenzies. There's always something fun to discover in Monopoly Go. So get off the bench and go download it now for free on Google Play or the App Store. Game on. You're listening to the Thursday edition of Locked On Seahawks. This is your host, Corbin Smith. A special thanks to all the 12s that are tuning in, and thank you for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. Make sure to check out the Locked On Seahawks YouTube channel or wherever you're listening to your podcast. We've kicked off our NFL draft coaching series so far. We've had Corey Allen, the head coach of Findlay University, the Oilers, to break down Michael Jarrell's unique path to the NFL and becoming a 6th-round draft pick. And we also had Pete Kwiatkowski, the defensive coordinator for Texas, previously of Washington, breaking down Byron Murphy II's rapid ascent to 1st-round pick for the Longhorns. So make sure to check out both those interviews, and we've got more coming on the way here on Locked On Seahawks. Now that the draft's in the rearview mirror and we've got rookie minicamp set to start tomorrow, it's time for one of our periodic depth chart reviews. And I know there's going to be some fans wondering, hey, what are some moves that could happen for the Seahawks now that we are past the draft? Well, they're going to have to take care of their salary cap issues first. And this is something we will dive into on tomorrow's show. We will be looking at some things that the Seahawks can do to try to open up some cap space. There are some mechanisms that John Schneider has at his disposal, because if we started the season today, they would actually have a negative $1.3 million effective cap space, according to overthecap.com. And that would mean they are in violation of the salary cap. So they need to get that taken care of. Again, there are some mechanisms for them to do that. But if they are going to be improving this roster, probably not going to be signing anybody at this point unless they have a couple other moves up their sleeve to open up cap space, because they just don't have anything to work with. They are up against the cap right now. In fact, they'd be in negative if we were starting the season today. But looking from a depth chart standpoint, let's start on the offensive side of the football. Those of you watching on YouTube, I've got the free agent signings in blue. I've got the rookies in yellow. And this is just how I see the depth chart right now for the Seattle Seahawks on the offensive line. I think if Seattle started a game tomorrow, Charles Cross, Laken Tomlinson, Oluwatimi, Anthony Bradford, and Abraham Lucas would be the starters up front. The only one there that I was a little torn on, obviously, I think Christian Haynes is a plug-and-play player. But again, we haven't seen him on the practice field yet. Anthony Bradford's only in his second season. He started 10 games last year. There were some solid games in there. He had his rookie struggles, but Seattle is going to open that competition up. And I think just because he started 10 games last year, we haven't seen Haynes play at all in the NFL yet, that I anticipate that he is going to be, Bradford, be out in front in this race, at least opening OTAs and going into training camp. As for tight end, Noah Fant, clearly the number one tight end. Farrell Brown signed as the replacement for Will Dissly, and then rookie A.J. Barner in that third tight end position. I think he could get some snaps right now for the Seahawks with his experience playing in a pro-style offense. As for the receiver spots, DK Metcalf, Jackson Smith and Jigba, Tyler Lockett, that's pretty self-explanatory. And then behind those guys, I think Jake Bobo right now is clearly the number 4 receiver, and I would have Laviska Shenault in front of D. Eskridge. Now, could that change if Eskridge can stay healthy? The Seahawks continue to talk him up. If he can stay healthy, this new coaching staff thinks they can get something going for him. Eskridge has the talent, but right now, Shenault has just been much more productive in the NFL, and he's got good slot capabilities, can create after the catch. He's actually proven it on the field in the NFL, so he's got the edge there. And Derek Young is hovering in that periphery as well. He had injuries last year. If he can stay healthy and get back to what he was doing late in his rookie season, maybe he can climb back into getting some snaps on the offensive side of the football. Quarterback spot, you got Sam Howell, Geno Smith. That's going to be your 1-2 punch. Maybe they're going to have Cordero from San Jose State. Maybe he ends up making a push there to be a practice squad quarterback, but none of the undrafted guys they're bringing in are going to be competing with Sam Howell for that backup job. And at running back, the only addition, George Halani, the undrafted rookie out of Boise State, going with Kenny McIntosh, Ken Walker III, and Zach Charbonnet. I don't really see any significant moves that need to be made at this point, or anything that is out there for the Seahawks that is going to improve this offense. Laken Tomlinson was probably the best guard they could go out and get in free agency. There's a good chance that he's going to start on the left side, at least to begin the season. He's played a lot of games in the NFL, former Pro Bowler, had a rough year with the Jets last year, but he's been really good for most of his career. So can he bounce back in this offense? I think there's a chance he could do that. You're not going to find anybody else out there that is going to be able to fill that void that'd be better than what the Seahawks already have. And they just invested a bunch of draft picks in the offensive line as well. So this does not feel like a unit. Yes, there's questions at guard. Are these rookies going to be able to play? And if not, are they going to be able to find a veteran that can plug in and keep that offensive line afloat? That is still very much a concern, but they at least have made the investments, bringing in a seasoned veteran like Tomlinson, getting Haynes in the third round, which is an absolute bargain. And LeMay is also a player to keep an eye on. The 6th round, played tackle the last few years at Utah, but he played guard before that for the Utes. And so there are some intriguing players, at least here now. It feels like the Seahawks have got some pieces. Now, can they put it all together with this newly constructed offensive line? As for the defensive side of the football, I think that this is a group where you could still maybe see a move or two coming down the pipeline, but I like where the Seahawks are sitting right now coming out of this draft. When you look at the edge spots, Boye Mafe and a healthy Uchenna Nwosu, I still like that 1-2 punch a lot in this defense for Mike Macdonald. I think both of them are going to be really good fits. And I think Derek Hall in year 2, he's got the length. He plays a physical brand of football. I actually can see him passing Darrell Taylor here, but Taylor's athleticism is something that coaches in the building, it's kind of like D. Eskridge. They feel like, hey, can we get the maximum out of this kid? And he can really be a pass rushing presence for us. And Nelson Caesar, the undrafted rookie out of Houston, he's one of the few undrafted guys I've got on this depth chart here, 3 deep, just because I think he's a guy that could potentially work his way into battling for a roster spot for the Seahawks. Had a really productive college career at Houston. At the defensive tackle spots, Byron Murphy II starting off as a backup behind Leonard Williams. Could he be a starter next to Williams eventually and surpass Jarran Reed? I'm not ruling it out, but he's not going to be a starter on day one. He's got to earn that. And Draymond Jones right now, I've got him in a role. If he fits better with Mike Macdonald's scheme, that could change things as well. He might play some snaps out wide off the edge. Miles Adams and Mike Morris, really solid depth guys at those positions. And at nose tackle, you get the big upgrade with Jonathan Hankins, Cameron Young going to year 2. There's still a lot of optimism about what he can be. And then when you go back behind the line of scrimmage, the linebacker spots, that is still a position I'm wondering if Seattle is going to look in the free agent market at some point and see what's out there, because you still have a dearth of experience after the two free agents they signed to one-year deals. And Tyrell Dodson has not started a ton of games in his career either. It's not like he's a super experienced player. He started 10 games last year and only had a handful of starts leading up to the 2023 season. Jerome Baker has been a starter for 6 years. So that is the one rock-solid vet that you've got there. But John Radigan, he's been a special teams guy. Drake Thomas got hurt in his undrafted rookie season. He's played very few snaps in the league. Patrick dressed for a couple games, but he is as raw as it comes. So there's not a lot of experience there. Of course, Tyrese Knight getting thrown in the mix, a fourth-round pick. Some are wondering if he's going to be ready to play on defense at all this year with the jump to the NFL. So there are a lot of questions still there. I can see that being a position that maybe Seattle goes out and tries to find some additional depth. And then when you look in the secondary, corner, I still think is the deepest position on this football team. Devin Witherspoon, Reek Woolen as your two starters. If Witherspoon kicks into the slot, then Mike Jackson or Trey Brown have both shown that they can be really good spot starters at minimum. I think Mike Jackson's been better than that when he's had his opportunities. And you invested 2 draft picks on day 3 in DJ James and Nehemiah Pritchett, who the Seahawks are very high on. It's going to be a while until they can see the field, and that's okay. They don't need to play right away. They can be special teams players that they develop, and maybe down the line they get some snaps on defense for the Seahawks. And that's what creates some issues here for a few veterans on the roster. We talked about this yesterday. I don't know where Kobe Bryant fits into this secondary puzzle right now. Maybe he goes back into the mix competing for snaps in the slot. Maybe they slide him back to safety, but both he and Artie Burns, those are the two players most negatively impacted by the fact Seattle just drafted not 1, but 2 Auburn corners on day 3 that have more athleticism than what Burns and Bryant offer. They are just better athletes, and they had good production playing against SEC competition. So both those guys are very much entering OTAs and eventually training camp on notice. And at the safety spot, you've got a number of players that you brought in free agency. You've got Rayshawn Jenkins, Kayvon Wallace, Jarek Reed II. They're hoping he's going to come back from a torn ACL in time for the start of the season. And, of course, Pro Bowler Julian Love. And there's a couple guys to keep an eye on there depth-wise. John Sutherland they liked a lot before he got hurt the end camp last year. Didn't play in any games because of that. And Ty Okada got to dress for a few games last year. So that is a position even for Kobe Bryant. Where do you fit in? You got some snaps in the preseason and training camp last year at the safety spots, but then you had a toe injury. Does he find his way into the mix to get snaps there? It's possible, but the secondary is deep enough at both corner and safety, at least in the short term, that there are a few veterans in this team that have played a lot of football or have had some promising football like Kobe Bryant. You're just wondering where they're going to fit in. So I think the linebacker spot, and maybe they'll look for some edge guys that are going to be cheap that they can bring in, but linebacker, off-ball linebacker feels like the one spot here where the Seahawks could still, if they open up a little cap space, could try to bring in another veteran that's played some snaps, at least to compete. Not a lot of guys out there on the market that are available in that regard at this stage of free agency after the draft, but they can look and see if there are any guys that they want to try to kick tires on going into the season. That would be my one question mark, both short-term and long-term, what the game plan is going to be at off-ball linebacker. Otherwise, I think they've done a pretty good job filling a lot of holes, at least in the short term, and they've got some really intriguing young players to build this defense around, including Byron Murphy II and Devin Witherspoon. Coming up next, we've got rookie minicamp at the VMAC starting tomorrow. I'm going to be previewing what to watch as the rookies hit the field for the first time. Don't go away. You're listening to the Thursday edition of Locked On Seahawks. This episode is brought your way by our friends at FanDuel. It's playoff time in the NBA and NHL. Baseball's in full swing, and FanDuel is your place to bet on every game. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150 win or lose. Do you think Austin Matthews has a hat trick brewing for the Toronto Maple Leafs? Is Aaron Judge going to smack not 1 but 2 home runs for the Yankees tonight? Are you feeling optimistic about Tyrese Halliburton scoring 20 or more points against the Bucks in the playoffs? You can bet on all of it on an app that is safe, secure, and easy to use. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet an automatic win. FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. You're listening to the Thursday edition of Locked On Seahawks. This is your host, Corbin Smith. A special thank, as always, to all the 12s out there. Thank you for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. We are now going to be ushering into the real offseason. Obviously, the Seahawks, they've been doing some things at the facility with their veterans. They've been doing strength and conditioning. They've just started to get some individual drills on the practice field in the second stage of their offseason program. But now we're going to start diving into more football-centric activities, and that's ushered in with rookie minicamp for the Seahawks. That'll take place Friday through Sunday, so kicking off tomorrow at the VMAC. And obviously, when you get to this stage of the offseason, we know the non-contact rules. Contact is prohibited. You're very limited in terms of what you can do in team drills, at least up to OTAs. And so that is going to make it that this is not necessarily a great opportunity to go out and evaluate players. The Seahawks are going to be putting a lot of guys through tryouts, trying to see if they can find somebody that's worthy of signing if they haven't already off the undrafted ranks, maybe some second and third year players getting some opportunities to participate in this as well. The McClendon Curtises and Raekwon O'Neals of the world probably going to be there because they need some extra snaps. But this is mostly about seeing the draft picks in uniform for the first time. That's really the first big thing that everybody's looking for this time of year. You want to watch those top picks in action. So Byron Murphy II, sporting a Seahawks helmet. He rooted for the Seahawks growing up. Now he gets to wear the helmet. Christian Haynes and 3 linemen overall on the offensive side of the football. You get to see those massive men out there for the first time. They don't get to really hit anybody, but you at least get to see how they look with the helmet, with the jersey and shorts on out there, and get to see how they're moving. That's really what I want to see, is the movement skills. That's what you can evaluate this time of year with offensive linemen. And of course, even the day 3 guys, you get to see Tyrese Knight out there, the 2 Auburn corners, Nehemiah Pritchett, DJ James. You get to see the other offensive linemen and see where they fit into the equation. So all these draft picks are going to be under the microscope. They are going to be, this is where they are the stars. You don't have any of the other veterans on the field that are going to be taking the limelight. This is a couple days where you get your feet wet with other rookies. You start to learn the playbook, start to figure things out a little bit, and you are the center of the show. And then when OTAs start, that's no longer the case. When a good portion of the veterans, which I would expect more than usual because it's the first year Mike Macdonald's the coach, I would expect that those veterans are going to want to be there to try to get this playbook down so that they can really dive into this season hitting the ground running. But all eyes are going to be on those draft picks first and foremost. The second thing, when you're talking rookie mini camps, again, there are a lot of position groups you can't truly evaluate. You're not going to see offensive linemen blocking. You're not going to see defensive linemen trying to work off of blocks. There's no physicality. In the secondary, corners are not allowed to aggressively play the football. So basically it becomes just watching, teams doing a walkthrough before games. And that's basically the pace that you're going to be playing at. You can't really evaluate a lot of these players, but what you can evaluate is the quarterback slinging the rock. And as I mentioned earlier, Chevan Cordeiro from San Jose State, formerly of Hawaii, he is the quarterback the Seahawks have signed to this point as an undrafted rookie. And Cordeiro was a player that I was fascinated by in the pre-draft process. I had an undrafted grade on him, even though there was a lot of tape that looked draft worthy. This guy has a live enough arm. He's really mobile, can create with his feet, had really good production as a passer and a runner in 5 college seasons. You see some of the traits that pop off that would suggest, hey, this guy maybe can hang around as a backup in the NFL. The problem is that there's just too many plays that are on the other end of the spectrum that don't look like an NFL quarterback. The decision-making is not where it needs to be, makes too many mistakes, doesn't necessarily go through his progressions. He is a 1 or 2 read and then tuck and run quarterback. So there's some things that led to him going undrafted, but he's got physical tools. And so that'll be fun to watch. And then Tua Tagovailoa's brother from Maryland, he is also going to be participating in this camp. And unlike Cordeiro, he had an incredibly productive all-around college career, started at Alabama with his brother and then transferred to Maryland. Actually is the all-time leader in passing yards in Big Ten history coming out of Maryland. He's 5'10", though, and he doesn't have a big arm. That led to a lot of interceptions trying to throw the ball downfield. So those two things in the equation, I've seen some people say, hey, he could be the next Russell Wilson. He does not have anything similar other than that they're both dual threat guys. They can move around and they're capable of making plays as passers, but the way that they do it is so different. Russell Wilson was one of the best deep ball throwers that we've ever seen. And Tagovailoa, he is not. This is not a guy that is going to be throwing bombs down the field. And so I'm curious to see how he looks out there, because there were some games where he looked like a draftable quarterback, but there's some obstacles there. The lack of height, that's certainly an issue. Not being able to see the pass rush and just not having enough arm strength, enough mustard on the football to be able to throw into tight windows, to be able to consistently hit receivers downfield. But I want to see how he and Cordero look out there. That is going to be something that we can visibly watch. We can see guys airing it out, throwing the ball. Obviously, they're not going to be dealing with a pass rush. That's a big part of evaluating quarterbacks, but you get the chance to see the physical tools, how they handle picking up the offense, some of the plays they make on the field. Obviously, with a bunch of rookies, it's going to be a crash course trying to learn that stuff on the fly. And last but not least, what I'm going to be watching for, this is when you have to start trying to figure out who the late round undrafted and tryout players are that could be gems. And again, I've mentioned this time and time again. I'm going to keep saying it because this is not real football. So you're not going to be able to evaluate a lot of position groups the way that you can in training camp in the preseason. But that doesn't mean that you can't identify players that have traits that pop off and you say, okay, that is a guy to keep an eye on. I'll just give an example. 2 years ago, Reek Woolen in rookie minicamp made a couple incredibly impressive plays with demonstrating his 4.2 speed and his recovery. And then when they got early in OTAs, even though they weren't having any contact, there was a 3-play sequence going against the speedy Marquise Goodwin, and all 3 of them, he was right on his hip. Goodwin could not separate against him, which that is not something that happens much. Marquise Goodwin is as fast as they come, at least in his prime. And that was really a display that jumped out to me like, this is a kid that we got to watch. He might be more ready than what we think to play. And that ended up being the case. So you want to be looking for guys that jump out where you can see the traits, you can see the movement skills. And so maybe somebody like a Jack Westover, the tight end from Washington, signed as undrafted rookie. Nelson Caesar, the undrafted rookie edge rusher from Houston. Those are just a couple names to keep an eye on. And then from a tryout basis, again, Tagovailoa is a player that I just mentioned that has pedigree and clearly was one of the best passers in the Big Ten, got all Big Ten honors as a second-team selection a couple times at Maryland. So there are some things in his resume that suggest he's a player to watch. But there's a few other players that I'll be keeping an eye on too. And I've got personal interest in seeing receiver Josiah Irish from Oregon State. Didn't have a lot of catches for the Beavers, but he's got 4.4 speed. He's a guy that can fly, has kick and punt return experience. So those are the kind of players you're just looking for athletes. You're looking for traits. And while you're not going to be able to evaluate a lot of position groups here, but there could be a few guys that jump out. We've seen it in the past, so it is still worth watching as rookie minicamp kicks off tomorrow at the VMAC. As always, you can follow me on X and Threads at Corbin Smith NFL. Make sure to subscribe to Locked On Seahawks on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast to make sure you don't miss a single episode. Coming up on tomorrow's show, I'll be joined by my co-host, Nick. The two of us will be diving into some things John Schneider and the front office can do to try to open up some cap space. And we'll be discussing observations from the first day of rookie minicamp. Make sure that you're listening in and enjoy the rest of your Thursday night. Go Hawks.